Hi, I'm Gwen. I'm from Berkshire County and I am a first-time voter.
Let's start off the conversation with talking about you seriously, truly being a first-time voter. You haven't voted yet. What a year to turn 18. What are your expectations? How are you feeling?
At first, I was a little confused with the whole mail-in process because more people were talking about that than ever before. And I was like, wait, do I have to vote by mail? And I definitely was considering it, but like this is my first time, so I really want to go in person. I want my little I voted sticker. Like I want the full experience.
Well, I think I didn't even think of this when we started talking. Not only is this your first election to vote in, like you recently turned 18, but there's also the pandemic going on. So that's changed how voting looks entirely.
Yeah.
What is your plan on voting?
I think I might actually go early, so I'm gonna have to go to like the local city hall and stuff. They have like different times and all that. And I'm gonna definitely go in person, and I just have to remember like my ID and like my mask and all that stuff. So I was like looking it up to make sure I like looked at all the restrictions before because I didn't want to like show up unprepared. So it's definitely been like stressful trying to figure it all out. So it's nobody's had to do it in like this fashion. So it's definitely hard. It's like I can't ask my parents because they've never had to do it like that.
Exactly, exactly. So why was voting important for you?
Well, one thing that I think is funny is when people are like, "Oh, I'm not like a politics person," or stuff like that. Like everybody's politics people, like politics literally affect everybody's lives every day. And I actually think that the pandemic itself has shown that so much because obviously every states have different things going on right now. So I think that shows that not just the presidential election is like important. I think that all levels of it are important because your voice matters. You want to put the people that you want to see these things done. And if you just sit home and just let things happen, like, I don't think that's any way to live. Like, we live in a country where you have the ability to do it. So, like, by giving that up, it's like what? I don't know.
From
So,
talking with your friend group or even your siblings or your family, do you sense that there's sometimes some intimidation with voting, especially a first time voter?
yeah, I definitely feel like I wasn't sure how, like, informed to get. Like, I'm definitely one to watch the news, but sometimes it gets discouraging, so I try not to get too involved. Like, it's like I kinda go in, like, waves. Like, I'll get super into it. I'm like, "Alright, I need to, like, take a little step back." But I always like to be generally informed of what's going on. I just think it's definitely intimidating because especially with, like, Massachusetts with the 2 questions, at first I've done actually a lot of research about both because I had no idea, and I didn't wanna just go in and pick yes or no because I think voting is one thing, but making sure you know what you're voting for is also just as important. So,
When I was growing up, like in my family, we were never a really big political family or talked about politics. And I think that that sometimes has a lot to do with it too. So when did you first get exposed to voting and really truly understand what your role in this democracy was? Who kind of started that for you?
I would definitely say it started more in high school because growing up again, like my family was not very into it. Like we wouldn't really talk about it. And like in school, I definitely got exposed, but only to like a certain extent because teachers obviously they don't want to tell you too much and sway your opinions either way. But I think one big thing for me was when in Florida the Parkland shooting, like that really hit home being a high school student. Like that was a really big like awakening time for me, and like our school was doing like protests and like we were doing like walkouts and all this stuff. So I think that's when I really started to like get involved and like want to learn more, and like standing at those protests like with all these kids like like going for one common cause. Like it was like a really empowering feeling. So it definitely like encouraged me to like look more into it and stuff. And actually in college now I'm looking into majoring in political science. So I went from not knowing much about it at all to like now I'm like very invested in it and like just the history of it and like where we are today and just even seeing how much the media affects it all. It's crazy.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the issues that you feel are really important to you and even to your generation at large.
Yeah, I think my generation, like some of the bigger things that definitely stand out are like the environment, like things with climate change. It's just because like everybody's told us like, oh, your generation's going to be the one to change it. So we're the ones that like want to get informed and we want to be there to make those changes. I think it's definitely a little frustrating because everyone's saying we're the ones to do it, but then they're like, oh, you're just kids. Like, so I'm glad that my generation like is able to vote now, because now we actually are able to start doing the things that everyone said that we're going to be able to do. Yes, climate change is a big one. I think for me, like just reproductive health, like women's rights, all that stuff definitely like hits close to home. And like I've written a lot of papers about it, and just like abortion access and rights and all that in general is definitely a big thing.
I know we talked a little bit about it being overwhelming to inform yourself on all these topics, and you mentioned the news, but are there any other ways that you try to keep yourself informed? And is there anybody that you talk to that kind of gives you a different perspective on different views that you might not have considered before?
I definitely I just like to listen to like people around me. Like my job, I'm a lifeguard, so I spend a lot of time like talking to other people in the pool, and just hearing like, and I see people from all different ages, so I get to hear like many different perspectives and stuff. And I would say my family not being involved in politics was like, it was good and bad, because I was able to like form my own opinions. Like there wasn't my parents swaying me saying, "Oh, you should think this," or "This is how we believe it should be." So I think that definitely allowed me to like seek out things on my own, and like say like, "Well, do I really believe this?" or like, "What do I really believe is like right?" and all that. So,
Do you know who you're going to be voting for in this year's election?
yeah, I'm going to be voting for Joe Biden.
And what made you come to that decision?
I definitely feel like you're not gonna like everything about someone. Like, there's never gonna be like 100% like, yes, like that's it. But with most of his views, those like tend to line up with things I believe in. Like, I did this assignment recently where we like looked at this big chart, and it was like all these questions that usually come up around election time, and like where each candidate stood. And like with environmental issues, like my views were similar to Biden's. Same with like abortion, like the LGBTQ plus community, like his views on that, like a lot of my views lined up with his, so it just made the most sense pretty much.
I know that this is the very first election that you're able to participate in, but before this, how closely were you following politics? Were you following local elections as well?
I definitely want to get more involved locally. I didn't pay too much, like not in my town, more like the state I would pay attention to. But definitely presidential. I've always like I said, watched the news and like seen stuff at like a more national level. But I think what really sparked me like looking more into local stuff was with the pandemic, just because like how my town's doing it versus, especially because all my friends have just gone off to college. So some of my friends are in Florida and like different states. So it's interesting to see how other places are handling it. And I feel like this was kind of like a wake up call, like showing that we really don't have as much control as we think. So it's important to put people that we want in control making these decisions for us. So
Now, there are many people out there that are not exercising their right to vote for whatever reasons. What would you say to somebody that isn't planning on voting this year?
I guess I would like ask them like why. I guess like I get intimidation definitely is like a big factor, but it's like we're in such an information age. Like if you had any questions, like you type it into Google and you can find like a list of resources on both sides to help fill in information you would need. And I think it's like it doesn't take too much of your time. It's just like it doesn't happen very often. And like it's something that like this is a right given to us, but like first of all, in other countries, like voting, that's not something that happens. Like, so the fact that we have these voices like available to us, but then we just like don't use it, like it's almost like frustrating. Like you can just take a little bit of time out of your day and just, because I feel like everybody does have opinions on it. So like why not go and like exercise your right?